So first, we'll actually use our default cube. We're going to go to the materials, add a new one, and double click and name it wood. Next, we can go to the shading tab. I'll use Control Space to make this nice and big. And I'll hit Shift A, go to Texture, Multiple Images. I opened up 3 images from texturehaven.com. I used the Planks Brown 10 textures with diffuse, normal, and roughness. So I'll plug in the diffuse to base color, the roughness to roughness. And then I'll search for normal map, plug this in there, and then I'll use the color in the normal, and I'll click down and use color space, non-color for the normal map. If I go to material preview with Z, you'll see that it now looks like wood. I'll bring the black up a little bit, and then we'll hit Shift Space and take a look. It can maybe even be up a little higher. That looks nice. So we'll go back to the Layout tab and do Material Preview. Okay, so I'm just going to go and Shift D and move this one off to the side. We can use that one later. Maybe a little bit more. And then I can go into the UV Editing tab. Well, first I'll scale on a Z 1.5 because I want this building to be about 10 feet high, 3 meters high. So I can go into Material Preview and I will go and add and I'll just rotate, holding Control to snap the rotation and rotate it 90 degrees. And then I can scale it up and maybe something like that. And then I can go tabbing to edit mode, and there's an option for correct face attributes that was just added in 2.90. There's also keep connected, which I don't really care about right now. So I'm going to scale on Y4, which will make it 2 meters since this cube started at 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. And I'll scale by X, and I'll scale it with 3. And I'll hit Control R to add an edge loop in the middle. I'll select 2 to go into edge selection, and I'll do GZ2 to bring that one up 2 meters. I'm just going to delete the bottom here, and I'll go and select these 2, hit P to separate it by selection, and I'll tab out and select this one. I'll actually select the original and call it walls, and then select a new one and call it roof with F2 to rename. So we can go into edit mode, and we'll select all at first with A, and then scale on the X with S and X. And that'll make it a bit bigger, maybe a little less. And then I can use this little guy to use the Y mirror. And I can hit GG. And as you can see, it's happening on both sides. And I can hit C to unconstrain it, and I can bring it over the edge a little bit. And then I can use a solidify modifier. I actually like to have it in my quick favorites, but you can use the main menu. And I can just adjust the thickness. In this case, it has to be in the negatives. Now we can go and tab into the walls mesh and hit Control R and scroll up to add 2 loops. The same here. You could also use page up or page down if you don't have a scroll wheel. And I'll hit Control R here with just 1 loop. And as you can see, it's kind of average, but we want it to be straight. So when I'm near the bottom here, I can hit E and I'll even it out with the bottom loop here. Hit Control R. And if I hit E when it's more at the top, it evens it out more with the top. So let's go and put it around here. Maybe a little bit lower. And I'll select these two faces, hit X and delete, and this one, X and delete. And now we got a door and a window area. One cool thing we can do with this is we can give it a nice little bevel. So we can go bevel. You can either use a few segments, or you could just leave it at like 1 and use this shading harden normals option. And if I, as you see, it needs auto smooth. If I add auto smoothing to normals here, you can see that it kind of looks like a higher poly bevel. So that's kind of nice. And then I can just put it to like 0.01 or something. Might add a little bit of niceness to that. And I can tab into edit mode. I'll hit S to scale and then hit Shift Z to make it only scale on the X and Y axis. As you saw, because it had the correct face attributes option, it fixed the UVs automatically. So I can hit Shift D to duplicate this, and then I can hit F2 and call this corner maybe. I'll tab into the wall mesh, and I'll select this edge, hit Shift S, cursor to selected, tab out, and then hit this one, Shift S, selection to cursor. And now it's centered around the cursor. I'll move it down a little bit, and then I can tab into edit mode and bring this face up a little, and bring this face down a little. Cool. Now we can use the snapping option with Shift Tab, and we'll use the increment. And we'll just hit Alt D and drag this over. And I can shift select the other corner, hit Alt D, drag it over here. Now it may be cool to add another one in the center here maybe. So Alt D, drag it into the center there. Actually, I don't really like this, so I might go into UV editing, select all. And I'll just kind of drag them out of these dark areas, kind of center them out, turn off snapping. Make them more in the center so that they don't easily get caught up in that. All right. I don't actually need this old one anymore. I can use those other ones. Next, I can hit Shift D on this guy, drag it off over here a little bit maybe. Now it might be a little bit big for a door frame, so I might tab into edit mode and hit Shift C to scale that down a little. Then I'll drag this guy down. I'll hit F2 to rename it, and I'll call it door frame. And I'll hit Alt D, drag it over here. Rotate on the Z axis, maybe 90 degrees to give it a different pattern. And I can Alt D, duplicate that, drag it off over here, rotate X 90, and position it a little bit better. Maybe drag it out a little bit, might be nice. I can hit A to select all and scale on the Y axis with S and Y. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I should go into the data tab and separate that. I should have used Shift D instead of Alt D. Anyway, I'll scale this down on the Y axis with SY. Hit SY to scale that down on the Y axis, and then I'll drag it off over here. And then I can hit Shift D this time, drag it off over there. Hit F2, call it window frame. A little bit more. Alt D. Maybe rotate on the Y axis 90 to give it a different pattern. Alt D. No, actually, Shift D. Rotate on the X axis 90. Tab into edit mode, scale Z. And I'll keep that in there. And I'll hit Alt D, drag it off over here. Then rotate Z 90 to maybe another 90 to give it a different pattern. I'll select these two and drag them back a little bit too. Cool. Next, I'll select all with A and I'll drag it up, try to get it over the grid area. Yeah. I hit Shift A, add a plane. I can hit Alt G to put it back in the center since I didn't want it there. Drag it up a little. Tabbing at edit mode, scale and Z. Scale on. Y. Hit Control R, put a loop in the center. And then select this edge and hit E to extrude. And I use the middle mouse button to select the x-axis actually by moving the x-axis. And then I can go and select maybe this wall here, select the material, and drag on the wood material. Then maybe I'll add a solidify modifier on this guy too. All right, and maybe I want that dragged out a little bit more. Next, I can go and select this guy, hit Shift D, add like a little column guy here, and hit Alt D and drag it over here as well. And I can tab into edit mode, hit Control R, add a loop here, maybe about there. Control R, another loop pretty close. And then hit 3 to go into face selection, Alt select there to grab the loop, and hit Shift Z to scale it down a little. I think that looks nice. All right, next we can go back into the roof. We'll go hit Control R here. And then we're going to try to carefully put it in the center of this door area. So I'll hit GG. And about there is good. Doesn't really have to be perfect. We're not being architects here. I'll hit E and extrude there. And E, extrude here. Drag it down. And see if I can get that close to the same area. Good enough. All right. What next? We can go and select this guy. Maybe we'll rotate this one 90 degrees to give it a different pattern from that guy. And then we'll hit Shift D. And we'll tab into edit mode, select all, and scale it down a bit. And then maybe I'll go and select this top face and scale it down. Then maybe go into object mode, bring it down, bring that down, hit Alt, left click to select the loop there, and then drag that down. All right, and then maybe drag it a little closer here. And then I can add an array modifier. And not on the x-axis, but on the y here, it looks like. Just a little bit. And then I can add a few more. No, that's good. Yeah, that's good. All right, and then we can go ahead and maybe hit Shift C here to add the cursor there. And then maybe I'll go and select one of these, hit Shift D. We'll call this rail. I actually forgot to call these guys. So I can call this one rail pillars, maybe. Then pillar. And this guy pillar as well. And then we can go and select this guy, hit Shift S, selection to cursor. And then we can go ahead and rotate this, hit Control to snap it into increments, and then drop it there. Tabbing to edit mode, scale it a little bit. And maybe scale in Z a little bit. See if we can't get this to look real nice. All right, I can hit Control R to add a loop here. And I can drag the top of this loop up here. I can hit Control B to add a bevel. And if I add a bunch of loops and make it real big, it just kind of rounds up the top there. And then I can select both of these. Well, actually, first I should probably use the UVs here. And then I can just give an offset to them that goes each array. And I can maybe try using this a little bit. That's okay. Well, actually, let's see. Can we get better? That's good enough. We'll hit Alt-D, drag this off over here. Now let's go ahead and add in some steps. So I'll select this guy maybe, hit Shift-D, rotate on the X with RX and hit Alt Control to snap it into increments. And then I can drop it down here. I'll hit F2 to rename it Stair. And I'll go in to here, drag this right about there. Center it out a bit more. Tabbing to edit mode. Maybe scale it up. Scale it down on the Z. Scale it up on the X. Maybe a bit more on the X. Then in edit mode, I can hit Shift-D. And I'll want to turn off correct face attributes here because it doesn't work that well when rotating whole meshes. So if I hit R, Y, 90, I can rotate that. Then I can turn it back on and scale in the Z. And maybe drag it over here or so. Then I can just add an array modifier right here. And then I can mess with where it goes. And then add another one. And then use the UVs offset to make it look a little bit nicer maybe. Now we'll just go ahead and maybe add a plane mesh in here. So I'll hit Shift-A, plane. Rotate on the rotate on the Y 90. And I'll drag it down here. Tabbing to edit mode, scale it down. Scale it down some more. Scale up on the Z. And drag it into there. We'll call it door with F2. And now we can just go ahead and select something with a wood material and drag it onto their door. Scale that up a little bit. I'll go into UV editing and try to scale it up a little bit nicer. Maybe something like that. Alright, and let's work on this. So let's go ahead and first apply this modifier by hitting Control A over the modifier. I'll use edge selection and go and mark this seam with Control E, mark seam, or right click also has it. And then I can Alt select here and use U, unwrap. And I'll go into UV editing. You'll want to use the UV squares add-on, which I'll have a link into the description if I remember. And you'll do 2 grid by shape. I'll hit R and hold Control to snap it in increments and get 90 degrees. And then I'll move into every one of these spots and scale it up. Looks nice. Now I'm not going to worry about the top as we're going to be adding snow there. And in this case, the bottom is fine, I guess. In other testing cases, it didn't work out so nicely, so you can just select it all. And hit U, unwrap, and then scale it up. And maybe rotate it if you feel like it. To get good results if you didn't get it nice there. And then I'll do the same thing on this bottom thing. I'll hit Control A here to apply that. And I'll tab into edit mode. Select one of these corner edges. And then hit Control E, mark seam. Then use 3 to go into face selection. And Alt select this loop and use U. Unwrap. In this case, I don't need to use the grid. I'll scale it up real big. Hit R. and use control to rotate it in 90-degree increments. I mean, in like 15-degree increments and get to 90 degrees. So there we go. This is done for this tutorial. So if you want to see the rest of the series and more videos like this, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and then I'll have the next video out soon.